Good morning, good morning. We are in a series entitled The Healthy Growing Church. We've looked at several aspects of that, and we want to kind of focus in on the healthy aspect of that this morning. I'm going to go back a little bit to some of my healthy church life training that we did in the early days of my time and tenure here with you. Some of those seminars, we're going to mention some of those factors. This last month, it seems like, now I'm doing good today, so don't anybody avoid me, but man, ever since Christmas, I have been battling a cold, a virus. I don't know what it is. I know it's not that corona thing, but I'm doing good today, finally. The last several days, life is good, and I'm getting back to health. You know, when we're sick, there are some symptoms, aren't there? You know, we'll have a scratchy nose, scratchy throat, runny nose, all that kind of stuff. And so there are symptoms when we're sick, but there are also symptoms of health as well. And that's what I want to talk about this morning are the symptoms of health. We're going to look at Colossians chapter 3, verse 12 and 13. And in those verses, there are some behaviors that I believe are signs of health. Now, when we talk about a healthy church, we often refer to the church, and the church is the ecclesia of God, the called out people of God. So who is the church? Us. We are. It's like the old little nursery rhyme. Here's the church and here's the steeple. Open the doors and see all the people. Well, we are the people, right? And so we are the people of God. We're the church. And so when we're talking about a healthy church, we're talking basically about healthy people. When we're talking about healthy people, we're talking about families as well. What would a healthy family look like? And so these principles kind of cross all those genres, if you will. Colossians chapter 3, verse 12 and 13 is our key verse this morning. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another. If any of you has a grievance against someone, forgive as the Lord forgave you. Now, before I dive into the points, and I'll kind of give you a warning, if you want to take some notes on the back of your worship program, my points are 3 F's, F, F, and F. We'll get to that in a moment. But before I do that, from my healthy church life days, Peter Steinke, in his book, Healthy Congregation, says this about healthiness. He says, a healthy congregation is one that actively and responsibly addresses and heals its disturbances, not one with an absence of troubles. Let me rephrase that. Let me repeat that. A healthy congregation is one that actively and responsibly addresses or heals its disturbances, not one with an absence of troubles. We often think a healthy church is one with no trouble, right? A healthy church is one that's a perfect church. There is no such thing. Have you found that out? We're glad that you're here, and if you're a newcomer to Mid Rivers, bless your hearts. We're glad you're here, but we just kind of want to do a disclaimer right up front. We're not a perfect church. If you are, I'm sorry, we're probably not the church for you. Somebody said, if you ever find a perfect church, don't go. You'll ruin it, right? So we're not a perfect church, and we just have to kind of get that out on the table and admit that right up front. I also want to do a disclaimer. When I'm preaching this sermon, I am not preaching this as though I've got this all down. I'm preaching this as though I'm a fellow struggler in the journey. So please be aware of that. But these principles, I believe, if we could get a hold of these, if we could get these down, we would be healthier in our relationships. We would be healthier as individuals, and we would be healthier corporately as a church. Now, 3 principles. The first one, healthy people, healthy churches face one another. Healthy people, healthy churches face one another. I find this in verse 13. He says, bear with each other and forgive one another if any of you has a grievance against someone. Now, it's interesting that the Apostle Paul would say, if any of you has a grievance against someone. The fact that he even mentions that betrays the possibility that that's an option, doesn't it? The fact that he says that it's possible means that it can happen. What does that mean for us? Well, that means for us that it is possible for Christians on occasion to be in conflict. That can happen. Matter of fact, not only can it happen, it does happen. It's normal for that to happen. If you grew up in a family, speaking of which, little commercial, we have our potential family minister, Taven, sitting right over here. That's right. Give him a hand. After the service, we're going to allow you the opportunity to affirm his call to our church, Mid Rivers Christian Church, right after the service. The table's right over there. Feel free to do that. We have ballots over there. He grew up in a family of 7 brothers and sisters. He is a brave soul. What a sturdy soul is he. I had one sister, and that was tough enough. I can't imagine a family of 7 siblings. Can you imagine? And so it's not will trouble happen or could trouble happen. It's every day is trouble, right? And so, well, when you bring people together, conflict and friction can occur. There will be conflict in the community. That's just a natural fact. You bring people together, there will be problems that occur on occasion. So it's not the problem that can make or break us. It's how we handle that problem, how we cope with that issue, how we resolve that issue, or as Peter Steinke says, how we address or heal that disturbance. So if any of you has a grievance against someone else, I looked up that word grievance. I looked up several passages to see how these versions put it. The King James, the New King James, says, if anyone has a complaint against another. The NIRV says, if you are holding something against someone. The New American Standard says, whoever has a complaint against anyone. I like the Living Bible. It says, never hold grudges. Just never hold grudges. Real simple. Never hold a grudge. It kind of reminds me of 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 5. It says, love keeps no record of wrongs. It doesn't keep a tally. I remember years ago, this couple, they were kind of like the skit guys. They were a duo, a married couple, husband and wife, and they were awesome. They did these dramas, and they were just so funny, and they were so witty. But they did this one skit in particular where they each had a clipboard. I see some clipboards down here. They each had a clipboard, and they were in their house, and somebody would do, the husband, he'd say, honey, I washed the dishes for you today. Check. He'd put it on his tab. Check. Well, honey, I picked up your dirty clothes today. She'd check hers. Well, I did this. Well, check. Well, honey, I cleaned the bathroom. Check. And they kept going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And finally she says, stop. You're 2 checks ahead of me. You got to stop. We're not even. We're not equal. And some people treat their relationships like that, don't they? They're keeping score. And finally, at the end of the skit, they came to the conclusion that keeping score is useless. There's no keeping a tally. Well, that's what the Bible says in 1 Corinthians 13, verse 5. Love doesn't keep a tally. Love keeps no record of wrongs. And so Paul's going to encourage us and give us some ideas about how to have healthy, better, more functional relationships. And I think part of that's found in verse 12. Look at the qualities and the values and the behaviors and the attitudes that we're to have. Therefore, he says, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. I think if we could do that, that would go a long way in restoring relationships, calming chaos in our relationships. Love doesn't hold on to grudges. When I thought about this, this advice or this philosophy is really kind of like counter to our normal human kind of like behavior, isn't it? I mean, think about it. It's natural to hang on to a hurt, isn't it? Isn't it? I mean, isn't it human nature to hang on to a hurt? Isn't it a human nature to get wounded? Isn't it a human nature to nurse and rehearse when people do us wrong? See, that's human nature, but God's calling us to supernatural behavior, not natural behavior, and He's encouraging us not to do that. But it's so hard. And I imagine as I look out over this crowd, there are many of you who probably could tell a story or two or three or 10 of a time or a person or a place or an instant where you were hurt. Some of you, it may have been a word or an action of a parent or a grandparent. Maybe for some of you, it goes back to your high school days or your junior high or even your grade school days. Things that were said or things that were done that are lodged in our memory. And it's a complaint. It's a grievance. It's a hurt. And I got to study it. Why is it, and what is the cycle that occurs when we hang on to hurts and when we harbor grudges? Well, first of all, one of the articles I read said people often harbor a grudge because they get hurt, they feel slighted, disrespected, or disregarded. Ever been there? They feel slighted, discounted, disrespected, disregarded. And then when that occurs, if we don't resolve that, it's natural to begin to tell ourselves an ugly story. We tell ourselves an ugly story. Sometimes things happen, we don't fully understand why or what. And when we don't fully understand, we begin to fill in the blanks, don't we? And are you like this? I know I am sometimes. Instead of filling in the blank when we're faced with the unknown with the best possible scenario, like do we do that? No. We fill in the blank with what? The worst case scenario, right? I mean, the worst possible outcome. I mean, the worst story ever. That's just how our brains work. That's how we're designed. If you don't think so, look at the news. Doom and gloom. Speaking of that, with the forecast, I don't understand this, but why is it that when they have the forecast, it says partly cloudy, partly sunny, partly rainy? Okay, when they give you the percentages, it's 20% rain. But they focus on partly rainy. It's 80% likely to be a great day. But what do they focus on? The 20% possibility that's negative. That's how the human nature works. Started back in the Garden of Eden. There's that apple, Eve. Right? Got to get a bite of that. The devil works on us that way. We tell ourselves an ugly story. And then when we don't reconcile or resolve that, we choose, and it is a choice, we choose to believe the worst. And often we will rehearse and nurse the worst case scenario. And Paul's saying, if any of you has a grievance against someone, don't do that. Don't get caught up in that cycle. When we do that, it's very natural to do, and this goes back to some of my training, what we call triangling, or the psychologists call it triangulation. In this scenario, person B has a problem with person C. There's a dotted line, a fracture, a break in the relationship. But very rarely, on rare occasions, will person B go to person C and talk that through and work that out. Isn't that true? How often somebody have a problem with you, will they come and talk to you about it? You'll often hear about it. How? Somebody else, the grapevine, the rumor mill, right? That's called a triangle. Person B doesn't go to person C. Person B goes to person A. And there's a triangle. Probably when you go to work on Monday, if you go into the break room and you're there for 6 minutes, you'll hear somebody talking triangles. Did you hear what he said? Do you know what she did? Instead of going and talking to her or she or him. Triangulation. Now, here's the problem with that. Not only does it not resolve the issue, but now you've drug a third party into the problem, haven't you? Now we got a third person who has no dog in the fight, no ability to solve the issue. Maybe they can pray for you, maybe they can give you advice. But now they're kind of caught in the middle, oftentimes between two friends. Is that fair to do to them? No, it's not. The Bible says the truth will set us free. And so I believe healthy people understand that, and they try to the best abilities to speak the truth in love. The Bible encourages us to do that, to speak the truth in love. We go to our brother, and in Matthew chapter 5, verse 23 and 24, Jesus says, therefore, if you're offering your gift on the altar, and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to them, and then come and offer your gift. So what he's basically saying is, even if you're doing something as important as an act of worship, and you're bringing your gift to the altar, he says, just stop right there. Just quit. Just go and get it straight with your brother. Reconcile the issue. Don't hang on to a hurt. Don't nurse and rehearse. Don't hold a grudge. Because it doesn't do you any good. It doesn't do them any good. And it certainly does no one else any good to involve them in a triangle. That's a healthy behavior. Number 2. The second F is forbear. Healthy people, healthy families, healthy churches forbear with one another. Now, the NIV uses the term bear with each other. Bear with each other. The King James Version, the old King James, uses the term forbear with one another. It's not a term we use a lot today, but forbearance literally gives the idea of holding up under pressure, like carrying a weight on your shoulder and straining and stretching and stressing to hold it up, to tough it through, to hang in there, to not give up, to not quit, to not give in to your lesser nature, but to hang tough. That's the idea of holding up, hanging tough, working it through. The NIRV says this, put up with one another. I like that. You ever have to put up with some people? No? You don't ever have any problems? Do you ever have to put up with some people? Now, let me ask you a better question. Are there some people got to put up with you? Huh? Right? Put up with some people. I got this little quote that was sent to me. Somebody sent it out. Maybe some of you can relate. This is way back before, I guess, flat screens. But they said, my parents had one of those old TVs that you used to have to slap on the side because it wouldn't come in clearly. And some of you have had that TV, huh? You had to slap them on the side because it wouldn't come in clearly. And they said, nowadays I feel way too much about people like that. You know, I feel like I just got to slap them on the side in order to get them come in clearly. I don't know. Maybe sometimes you get people maybe that happens to you. That's the idea, to forbear, to put up with, to bear with each other. Kind of reminds me of this mother. She was driving down the road. She had 2 preschoolers in the back of her back seat, and they were in their car seats, and she was driving, and then she got to a stoplight. It was supposed to turn green, and her car died. She didn't know what to do. She's kind of frantic. She's trying to handle the kids and trying to figure out what to do. And the guy behind her annoyingly and incessantly began to honk. Honk, honk, honk. He just wouldn't let up. Finally, he got so impatient, he got out of his car, came up to the side of her vehicle, and she rolled down her window. And he started to yell at her, why aren't you moving? What's going on? And he started giving her, and she just looked up at him. She said, Mister, God loves you. and I'm trying real hard. That's kind of the idea. Forbearing, hanging tough, putting up, bearing with each other. Number 3, healthy people, healthy churches, healthy families forgive one another. Notice what he says in 1 Corinthians, or Colossians chapter 3, verse 13. He says, forgive one another. Now, it'd be really good if he had just stopped there, wouldn't it? But he had to go further, didn't he? Not only does he say forgive one another, but then he goes on to say, forgive one another as the Lord forgave you. Hello. Uh-oh. That's a whole nother ball game, isn't it? Not only am I to forgive, and by the way, that's not a suggestion. It's not a recommendation. It is a command. God commands us to forgive one another. And you don't have to love somebody to forgive them. You don't even have to like somebody to forgive them. You can give forgiveness. You really can. But then we're to forgive as the Lord forgave us. To live above with the people we love, oh, that will be glory. But to live below with the people we know, well, now that's another story. Amen? Have you ever been driving down the road? This happened to me just yesterday. Excuse me, I still got a little tickle. And you're driving down the road, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a car next to you just like comes over into your lane, about crashes you. You ever have that happen? That happened to me just yesterday. Now it's confession time. We're going to get really real in church here today. Are you ready? We get real here at Mid Rivers. It's confession time. You're in church. You can't lie. See, they're running right now. I'm getting out of here now. Hello. Whoops. When that happens to you and somebody cuts you off, what are the thoughts that immediately go through your mind? I know they're real Christian thoughts, aren't they? You're thinking, jerk! Idiot! Watch where you're going! They're texting, right? Some of them aren't texting and they're doing full internet searches while they're driving. Isn't that what goes through your mind? What goes through my mind? Until I'm driving down the road and I accidentally pull over and I didn't see him and cut somebody off. Been there, done that. And when that happens, it's so humbling. Because you know what's going through their mind. Jerk! Idiot! And I want to say to them, I'm a good guy. I'm a nice guy. I'm a pastor. So I slow down and roll down my window. No, I don't. I want to inform them of my character, my qualities, and who I am and what I'm about. No, don't do that. They'll shoot you. In this world, you get shot. Don't do that. But I'm so reminded that I'm faulty too. And I blow it too. And I screw up once in a while as well. And in those times, I hope the guy behind me or beside me gives me grace. And if I want to be given grace, then it's incumbent upon me to give grace. And it's interesting, this word for forgive comes from the root word grace. It's charizomai or some crazy thing. It's the root word for grace. And to forgive means to give grace to someone else. And you know, whenever I preach on this, it's really tough because I know when I'm preaching to a crowd this size, there are people here who have been unduly and unfairly wounded by other people. And can I just do a disclaimer? When I'm telling you that we need to learn to forgive, I in no way want to minimize your hurt. I in no way mean to enable or insinuate that what people did or said to you was all right. I would never do that. People who are abusive, that's just not right, and you should not have to be subject to that ever. God does not mean for his children to be abused. But it is important for us to learn to forgive, even when people have done us bad or done us wrong or said or done hurtful things. And the reason is we need to forgive, if not for them, then for us. We need to forgive because we need to be free of the bondage of that memory, the bondage of that issue, the bondage of that action. And until we can forgive, until we can let go, until we can release them, then we are still held by the power of those people who hurt us in the past. Someone said, when we hold someone in the prison of unforgiveness, the problem is we are stuck guarding the gate and the door. And that's why God encourages us to release that and to let go and to forgive. I want to close with a story about a lady. Many of you may have heard her name. Her name was Clara Barton. She was the founder of the Red Cross. That's correct. She was the founder of the Red Cross, and which is now very well established and known worldwide. But in its infancy, in the early days, when she was trying to start up and begin this ministry, she had one particular lady that was an ardent opponent. I mean, somebody that relentlessly talked bad about her, relentlessly undermined and talked bad about the organization. I mean, this woman was dogged in her determination to ruin Clara Barton's credibility. And years later, at this banquet where they were going to honor Clara Barton, Clara and her assistant were there, and that lady who had been the ardent was there. And she walked by, and Clara spoke to her rather cordially. And her assistant just thought, what in the world? And as that lady walked away, she said to Clara Barton, she says, don't you remember who she is? Don't you know what she did to you? Don't you remember all the things that she said about us? Don't you remember that? And I love Clara's response. She says, yes, I distinctly remember forgetting that. I like that. I distinctly remember forgetting that. Clara is not the only one who forgets. In the book of Jeremiah, chapter 31, verse 34, God says, for I will forgive their wickedness and will remember their sins no more. You know, we often talk about the omnipotence of God, that God can do everything. Well, according to the Bible, he can't do everything. Hebrews says he can't be unfaithful. And Jeremiah says he can't remember the sins that he forgives. I don't know about you, but that's an awesome thought, isn't it? I will remember their sins no more. My biggest fear is when we get to heaven, he's going to pull out the reel, the tape, the DVR, the recorder, whatever the medium is, and then he's going to replay, okay, Bob, we're going to go back over your life, and here's all the places you screwed up, right? Isn't that how we picture it? He says, I will forgive their wickedness, and I will remember them no more. And he calls us to forgive others. Forgive as the Lord forgave us. And how did the Lord forgive us? He tells us in Romans chapter 5, verse 8, God demonstrates his own love toward us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. You see, God loved you, and he loves you as you are. And he loves you for who you are. But he loves you enough to not leave you like you are. That's why he sent his son, Jesus Christ, to die on the cross